The blood-red sun dipped below the jagged horizon of Portland, Oregon, casting long shadows across the dusty Main Street as Zara Thornton clutched the crumpled eviction notice in her trembling hands. She had exactly 3 days to vacate her late father's mercantile, the only home and business she'd ever known, all because her stepmother Victoria had convinced the bank that Zara was embezzling funds and couldn't be trusted with her inheritance. It was 1876, and at 22, Zara had already weathered more storms than most. Her mother had died during a cholera outbreak when Zara was just 8 years old. Her father, Jonathan Thornton, had married Victoria Holt 3 years later, a woman who'd hidden her true nature behind a veneer of charm until the ink on the marriage certificate was dry. For years, Zara had endured Victoria's subtle cruelties, always keeping the peace for her father's sake. But when Jonathan died 6 months ago from pneumonia, Victoria had wasted no time in trying to seize everything he'd left behind. "Miss Thornton." A deep voice startled her, causing her to hastily wipe the tears from her cheeks before turning around. Flynn Rider stood before her, hat in hand, the setting sun glinting off his sandy brown hair. He was tall, taller than most men in Portland, with shoulders broad from years of hard work. At 28, he had already established himself as one of the most respected cattle drivers in the region. His keen green eyes studied her face with concern. "Mr. Rider," Zara acknowledged, attempting to compose herself. "I apologize. I didn't hear you approach." "No need for apologies, Miss Thornton." Flynn glanced at the paper in her hand. "Trouble?" Zara hesitated. She barely knew Flynn Rider beyond polite exchanges when he came to town with his cattle drives. He'd always been kind, purchasing supplies from her father's store and occasionally stopping to chat, but they were hardly confidants. "It's nothing I can't handle," she replied, squaring her shoulders. Flynn's expression remained gentle but skeptical. "With all due respect, Miss Thornton, that paper's got you more upset than nothing typically would." A gust of autumn wind swept down the street, catching Zara's dark hair and pulling several strands loose from her simple bun. Flynn's eyes tracked the movement before returning to her face, his gaze unwavering. "The bank is foreclosing on the mercantile," she finally admitted. "I have until the end of the week to vacate." Flynn frowned. "That doesn't make sense. Your father ran the most profitable business in Portland." "Yes. Well, according to my stepmother, I've been mismanaging funds since his death," Zara said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "She's convinced Mr. Wilson at the bank that I'm unfit to maintain the business." "That's ridiculous," Flynn said immediately. "Everyone in town knows you practically ran that store alongside your father for years." His instant defense caught Zara off guard. She'd become so accustomed to people believing Victoria's lies that hearing someone stand up for her made her throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you for saying so, Mr. Rider, but I'm afraid Mr. Wilson finds my stepmother's words more compelling than mine." Zara carefully folded the notice and tucked it into her pocket. "If you'll excuse me, I have inventory to complete before I'm forced to sell everything off." Flynn's jaw tightened. "This isn't right, Miss Thornton. Your father would never have wanted this." "No," Zara agreed softly. "He wouldn't have. But he's not here to stop it, and I seem to be out of options." "Perhaps not," Flynn said, settling his hat back on his head with determination. "I've known Horace Wilson for many years. Would you allow me to speak with him on your behalf?" Zara blinked in surprise. "I couldn't ask that of you, Mr. Rider." "You didn't ask. I offered." A slight smile curved his lips. "Besides, I have a vested interest in keeping Thornton's mercantile open. No other store in 3 counties carries those peppermint sticks I'm so fond of." Despite everything, Zara found herself returning his smile. "Is that so?" "Absolutely." I've been known to ride 10 miles out of my way just to get my hands on them." His expression grew serious again. "Let me help, Miss Thornton. At least let me try." Zara studied him, wondering why this man she barely knew would go out of his way for her. But there was something in Flynn Rider's steady gaze that inspired trust, a rare commodity in her life these days. "Very well, Mr. Rider. I would be grateful for any assistance you could provide." Flynn nodded, his eyes warming. "I'll head over to the bank first thing tomorrow morning. In the meantime, don't start packing just yet." As he tipped his hat and turned to leave, Zara called after him. "Mr. Rider," he paused, looking back over his shoulder. "Why are you doing this?" Flynn considered her question for a moment. "Because your father was a good man who always dealt fairly with me, and because I've watched you work yourself to the bone keeping his dream alive." He paused. "And because in my experience, Miss Thornton, the truth has a way of coming to light, but sometimes it needs a little help." With that, he strode away, boots kicking up small clouds of dust as the last crimson rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains. Zara stood rooted to the spot, watching him go. For the first time since her father's death, a flicker of hope warmed her heart. She didn't know if Flynn Rider could actually help her, but knowing someone believed in her innocence was enough to make her stand a little straighter as she returned to the store. The bell above the mercantile door jingled as she entered. The familiar scent of leather, coffee beans, and fresh fabric welcomed her. This store had been her father's pride and joy, a business he'd built from nothing when Portland was little more than a frontier settlement. Now, it was filled with quality goods from back east, necessary supplies for homesteaders, and specialty items you couldn't find elsewhere in the Oregon Territory. She moved methodically through the store, checking inventory and straightening displays even though it might all be for nothing. When she reached the candy jar containing the peppermint sticks Flynn had mentioned, she couldn't help but smile. She'd noticed him buying them on his visits to town, but had never realized they were a particular favorite. A sharp knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Through the window, she could see Victoria standing outside, elegant as always in a green silk dress that highlighted her auburn hair. At 35, Victoria Thornton was still a strikingly beautiful woman, a fact she used to her advantage in manipulating others. With a sigh, Zara unlocked the door. "We're closed," Victoria pushed past her. "Don't be childish, Zara. I'm not here as a customer." "Why are you here then?" Zara asked, closing the door. Victoria removed her gloves with deliberate slowness. "I heard you received notice from the bank today. I wanted to see how you were taking the news." The false concern in her stepmother's voice made Zara's stomach turn. "I think you know exactly how I'm taking it, considering you're the one who orchestrated it." "Such accusations," Victoria clicked her tongue. "I merely informed Mr. Wilson of certain irregularities I noticed in the ledgers. As your father's widow, it's my duty to ensure his business is being run properly." "There are no irregularities," Zara said through clenched teeth. "You altered the books yourself before showing them to Mr. Wilson." Victoria's smile never wavered. "Can you prove that?" They both knew she couldn't. Victoria had been careful. "What I don't understand," Zara continued, "is why you're doing this. Father left the business to me in his will." "A terrible oversight on his part," Victoria said, examining a shelf of fine china. "Jonathan never fully appreciated my business acumen, but I've managed to convince the executor that you've mismanaged your inheritance to the point of insolvency. Once the store is sold, as your legal guardian until you marry, I'll be entrusted with managing the proceeds for your benefit." Zara's hands curled into fists. "I'm 22 years old. I don't need a guardian." "The law disagrees, my dear," Victoria said with false sweetness. "Unmarried women require guidance, particularly when they've demonstrated such poor judgment. The only poor judgment my father ever showed was in marrying you, Zara snapped before she could stop herself. Victoria's face hardened. Be careful, Zara. I've been quite generous in offering to let you continue living in the small room above the Jenkins bakery once this is settled. I could just as easily arrange for you to be sent to your aunt in Boston. The threat hung in the air. Aunt Margaret was Victoria's sister, not Zara's blood relation, and every bit as manipulative as Victoria herself. I won't let you take this store, Zara said with quiet determination. It was my father's legacy. And now it's my compensation for enduring years, married to a man who never loved me the way he loved your precious mother, Victoria replied, her mask slipping to reveal the bitterness beneath. It's already done, Zara. By the end of the week, Thornton's Mercantile will be sold to the highest bidder, which, coincidentally, will be Edmund Holloway. Zara felt the blood drain from her face. Edmund Holloway was a wealthy rancher who had been pursuing Victoria even before Jonathan Thornton's death. You're selling my father's store to your suitor, future husband, Victoria corrected with a self-satisfied smile. Edmund and I will be married by Christmas. The Mercantile will make a lovely wedding present, don't you think? Of course, we'll be changing the name. She moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Zara, I wouldn't bother trying to fight this. I've already explained to several prominent citizens how you've been stealing from the store to fund your extravagant lifestyle. What extravagance? Zara demanded. I've never taken a penny that wasn't rightfully mine. That's not what people are saying, Victoria replied with mock sympathy. They're quite shocked by the stories of your secret gambling habit and your taste for expensive trinkets. Some are even suggesting there might be a young man involved, one to whom you've been funneling money. Horror washed over Zara as she realized how thoroughly Victoria had poisoned the town against her. It explained the strange looks she'd been receiving, the way conversations stopped when she entered rooms. No one will believe such outrageous lies, she said, but even to her own ears her voice lacked conviction. They already do, my dear. Victoria opened the door. You've always been too trusting, Zara. Too honest. That's your weakness. You never learned to play the game. With a final triumphant smile, she departed. Zara locked the door behind her stepmother and leaned against it, fighting back tears. Victoria was right about one thing: she didn't know how to navigate this kind of deceit. Her father had raised her to believe in honesty and fair dealing. What chance did she have against someone who wielded lies like weapons? Her gaze fell on the store ledger open on the counter. With determined steps, she approached it and began reviewing the entries. If Victoria had tampered with the books, there might be evidence, something she could use to prove her innocence. Hours later, as the oil lamp began to sputter, Zara finally closed the ledger in frustration. Victoria had been too clever to leave obvious traces. The alterations were subtle, just enough to suggest carelessness or dishonesty on Zara's part, but nothing that could definitively prove tampering. Exhausted, she climbed the stairs to her small apartment above the store. As she prepared for bed, Zara found herself thinking about Flynn Rider and his unexpected offer of help. She wondered what he would say to Mr. Wilson tomorrow, and whether it would make any difference. In a town where her family name had once commanded respect, Zara now felt like an outsider. Victoria had seen to that, whispering her poisonous lies into receptive ears. But Flynn had believed her instantly, without question. That single act of faith meant more than he could possibly know. As she drifted off to sleep, Zara made a promise to herself. No matter what happened with the bank, she would not allow Victoria's lies to go unchallenged. Somehow, she would reclaim her father's legacy and her own good name, Morning arrived with pearl-gray light filtering through the curtains. Zara rose early, as was her habit, and dressed in one of her simpler day dresses, a practical blue cotton that her father had always said matched her eyes. She twisted her dark hair into its usual neat bun and headed downstairs to open the store, refusing to act as though anything had changed until it absolutely had to. The routine was comforting, sweeping the boardwalk, dusting the shelves, arranging the fresh produce she'd purchased from local farmers. By the time she unlocked the front door at 8 o'clock, Zara had almost managed to convince herself that it was a day like any other. That illusion shattered when Mrs. Perkins, who had been shopping at Thornton's Mercantile for over a decade, entered the store and promptly sniffed with disapproval. "Good morning, Mrs. Perkins," Zara greeted her with a smile. "We've just received a shipment of that lavender soap you're fond of." The older woman barely glanced at her. "I'm merely here for flour and sugar, nothing more. I'll not be needing any extras." The implication was clear. Mrs. Perkins believed the rumors that Zara had been inflating prices to pocket the difference. "Of course," Zara said, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the sting. "You'll find both items on the back wall." As Mrs. Perkins made her selections, the bell above the door jingled again. Flynn Rider stepped inside, removing his hat as he entered. His gaze found Zara immediately, and he offered a small nod. "Miss Thornton," he greeted her, approaching the counter. "I wonder if I might have a word with you." "Certainly, Mr. Rider." Zara glanced at Mrs. Perkins, who was making no effort to hide her interest in their conversation. "Perhaps in my office." Flynn followed her through a doorway behind the counter into the small room that had served as her father's office for 20 years. The space was meticulously organized, ledgers arranged chronologically on shelves, correspondence filed neatly in drawers, a well-worn desk positioned to catch the morning light. "You've spoken with Mr. Wilson?" Zara asked without preamble once the door was closed. Flynn nodded, his expression grim. "I have. Miss Thornton, I'm afraid the situation is more complicated than I initially realized." Zara's heart sank. "He wouldn't reconsider the foreclosure." "Not without proof that the financial discrepancies were falsified," Flynn confirmed. "But there's more. Your stepmother has been quite thorough in her campaign against you." "She told me as much last night," Zara said, sinking into her father's chair. "She's been spreading rumors about me throughout town." Flynn's jaw tightened. "Yes, and they've reached beyond Portland. Mr. Wilson mentioned receiving inquiries from banks in Salem and even San Francisco regarding your creditworthiness." "San Francisco?" Zara echoed in disbelief. "But I've never conducted business there." "Victoria has apparently suggested you've been using the store to secure loans under false pretenses," Flynn explained. "She's painted a picture of you as, forgive me, a young woman of questionable character who uses her charm to manipulate men into financial arrangements." Zara felt her cheeks burn with humiliation and anger. "That's absurd. I've never—" "I know," Flynn interrupted gently. "Anyone who spent more than 5 minutes in your company would know such claims are ludicrous, but Victoria is well connected, and her companion, Mr. Holloway, even more so." Zara's fingers trembled as she straightened papers on her desk. "Did Mr. Wilson tell you they plan to sell the Mercantile to Edmund Holloway once it's foreclosed upon?" Flynn nodded. "He mentioned it was likely, given Mr. Holloway's interest in expanding his business holdings in town." "It's not business interest driving him," Zara said bitterly. "Victoria and Edmund plan to marry. This is her wedding gift to him, my father's life's work." "Miss Thornton," Flynn said after a moment, "I believe I may have a solution, but it would require your trust." Zara looked up, studying his earnest face. "What kind of solution?" I've been saving to purchase land of my own, a small ranch where I could raise cattle instead of just driving them for others. I have enough set aside to cover the mercantile's supposed debts and prevent the foreclosure." "You want to buy my store?" Zara asked, confusion evident in her voice. "No," Flynn said quickly. "I want to invest in it, become a partner, if you will. We would draw up papers making it clear that while I'm contributing financially, you remain the primary owner and operator." Zara stared at him in astonishment. "Mr. Ryder, that's incredibly generous, but I couldn't possibly accept. Your savings are for your ranch." "The ranch can wait," he said simply. "What Victoria is doing to you is wrong, Miss Thornton. I can't stand by and watch a good person lose everything because of another's malice." "But why would you do this for me? We barely know each other." Flynn's expression softened. "I knew your father well, Miss Thornton, better than you might realize. When I first came to Oregon 7 years ago, I was just a boy of 21 with nothing but determination and a good horse. Your father gave me my first job driving cattle to Portland. When I lost everything in a flood the following spring, he extended credit to me at this very store when no one else would." He paused, emotion evident in his voice. "Jonathan Thornton was the finest man I've ever known. Helping his daughter seems a small way to repay the kindness he showed me." Zara felt tears threaten. She'd had no idea her father had such a connection with Flynn Ryder. "Even if I were to accept your offer," she said, fighting to maintain her composure, "Victoria has done more than create financial problems. She's undermined my reputation. No one in town will do business with me if they believe I'm dishonest." "Then we'll have to prove you're not," Flynn said with determination. "Victoria's lies may be elaborate, but they're still lies. The truth must exist somewhere, we just need to find it." "How?" Zara asked. "She's been careful not to leave evidence." Flynn considered this. "When did the rumors begin exactly?" "Almost immediately after Father's death," Zara replied. "The reading of the will revealed he'd left the mercantile to me outright with only a modest allowance for Victoria. She was displeased." "And these financial discrepancies in the ledgers, when did they start appearing?" Zara frowned, thinking. "The first time Mr. Wilson questioned me about the accounts was about 3 months ago. He mentioned unusual withdrawals dating back approximately 2 months before that." "So about a month after your father's death," Flynn mused. "Who had access to the books during that time?" "Just myself and Victoria," Zara said. "Father's solicitor, Mr. Bennett, reviewed them once while settling the estate, but he wouldn't have altered anything." Flynn nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Bennett might be a good place to start. As the executor of your father's will, he would have a professional interest in ensuring his client's wishes are honored." The bell from the store jingled, reminding Zara that she had a business to run, at least for now. "I should get back," she said, rising from her chair. "Mrs. Perkins is probably wondering where I've disappeared to." "Of course," Flynn agreed, standing as well. "Will you consider my offer, Miss Thornton?" Zara hesitated. "It's extraordinarily kind, Mr. Ryder, but I can't in good conscience accept your savings." "Then don't think of it as charity," he suggested. "Consider it a business proposition. Your father built one of the most successful establishments in Portland. That's an investment worth making." Before she could respond, a commotion from the store interrupted them. The office door burst open to reveal Mrs. Perkins, her face flushed with indignation. "I should have known," the woman exclaimed, her gaze darting between Zara and Flynn. "Sneaking off to your office with a man, and you wonder why people question your character." "Mrs. Perkins," Zara began, horrified. "Mr. Ryder and I were discussing business matters." "I'm sure you were," Mrs. Perkins sniffed. "Just as I'm sure those missing funds were all business matters as well. Your poor father would be ashamed." Flynn stepped forward, his voice low and controlled. "Mrs. Perkins, I've known you for many years, and I've always respected you as a woman of good judgment. That's why I'm surprised to hear you repeating unfounded rumors about Miss Thornton." The older woman blinked, momentarily flustered by his direct approach. "They're hardly unfounded when her own stepmother has confirmed them, Mr. Ryder. And you find it more likely that the daughter Jonathan Thornton, raised with such care, suddenly turned dishonest upon his death, rather than considering that a stepmother who stands to gain financially might be spreading falsehoods." Flynn asked with deceptive mildness. Mrs. Perkins opened and closed her mouth several times. "Well, Miss Thornton has maintained this store with the same integrity her father instilled in her," Flynn continued. "I'd stake my reputation on it, and I believe if you reflect honestly, Mrs. Perkins, you'll recall that in all your years shopping here, neither Jonathan nor Zara Thornton ever gave you reason to doubt their honesty." The woman's righteous indignation seemed to deflate somewhat. "I suppose that's true," she admitted reluctantly. "Jonathan was always scrupulously fair in his dealings." "As his daughter continues to be," Flynn said firmly. Mrs. Perkins glanced at Zara, uncertainty replacing some of the suspicion in her eyes. "I'll need to pay for my purchases," she said stiffly. "Of course," Zara replied, moving past her to the counter. She tallied Mrs. Perkins' items, careful to write each price clearly on the receipt so there could be no question of overcharging. After the woman left, Zara turned to Flynn with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. "Thank you for defending me," he shrugged, though his eyes remained serious. "I only spoke the truth, but it's clear Victoria's rumors have taken root deeper than I realized." "Yes," Zara agreed soberly. "And Mrs. Perkins is one of the more reasonable residents of Portland. Others are far more willing to believe the worst." Flynn replaced his hat. "I need to see to my cattle, but I'll return this afternoon. Perhaps we could visit Mr. Bennett together. He may have insights that could help us untangle this situation." Zara hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I close the store at 5. "I'll be here," Flynn promised. As he turned to leave, he paused. "Miss Thornton." "Yes." His green eyes held her steadily. "Don't let them make you doubt yourself. I've observed enough to know what kind of person you are." With that, he departed, leaving Zara to wonder at the strange turn her life had taken. Yesterday, she had been facing the loss of everything she held dear, alone against Victoria's machinations. Today, she had an unexpected ally in Flynn Ryder, a man who seemed determined to help her fight back. The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers, some openly hostile, others merely distant. By the time Zara hung the closed sign at 5 o'clock, she was emotionally exhausted from maintaining a pleasant demeanor in the face of such treatment. True to his word, Flynn appeared promptly, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt under his trail-worn jacket. The sight of him waiting outside the store brought an unexpected warmth to Zara's chest. "You look tired," he observed as she locked the door behind them. "It's been a trying day," she admitted, "but I'm ready to see Mr. Bennett if you are." They walked side by side down Portland's Main Street toward the solicitor's office. Zara was acutely aware of the curious glances. They received a young, unmarried woman in the company of one of the region's most eligible bachelors, was bound to cause gossip even without Victoria's rumors. "People are staring," she murmured. "Let them," Flynn replied easily. "Perhaps seeing you with someone who publicly respects you will make them reconsider what they've heard." Herbert Bennett's law office was a modest building near the courthouse. The gray-haired solicitor looked up in surprise when they entered. "Miss Thornton," he greeted her, rising from behind his desk. "And Mr. Ryder, this is unexpected." I apologize for calling so late in the day, Mr. Bennett, Zara said, but we have an urgent matter to discuss regarding my father's estate. Bennett gestured to the chairs across from his desk. Please sit down. How can I help you? Zara explained the situation: Victoria's rumors, the bank's foreclosure, and their suspicions about tampered financial records. Bennett listened attentively, his bushy eyebrows drawing together in concern. I reviewed those ledgers myself shortly after your father's passing, he said when she finished. Everything was in perfect order then. Jonathan Thornton was meticulous about his accounts. That's what I thought, Zara said. Is there any chance you kept copies of the figures you reviewed? Bennett nodded slowly. As a matter of fact, I did. As executor, I'm required to maintain records of the estate's assets at the time of death. He rose and moved to a filing cabinet. I have summary sheets, though not the detailed entries. He extracted a folder and returned to his desk. Here we are. These are the account balances as they stood when I reviewed them 6 months ago. Flynn leaned forward. And these would reflect the exact state of the mercantile's finances when Mr. Thornton died. Precisely, Bennett confirmed. Jonathan died on February 12th. I conducted my review on February 20th. Zara scanned the documents, her heart racing. According to this, the store had over $5,000 in cash reserves and no outstanding debts besides the regular supply orders. That's correct, Bennett said. Jonathan ran a profitable business and was quite conservative with spending. There was no indication of financial distress whatsoever. Flynn's eyes met Zara's. So if Mr. Wilson is now claiming the business is insolvent, someone has been systematically draining the accounts since my review, Bennett finished grimly. Victoria, Zara said with certainty. She must have been withdrawing funds and then altering the books to make it appear that I was responsible. Bennett frowned. That's a serious accusation, Miss Thornton. But a plausible one, Flynn interjected. Victoria stands to gain control of the proceeds from the store's sale if she can prove Zara mismanaged it. Indeed, Bennett mused. And with Edmund Holloway set to purchase the property at auction, the entire affair appears suspiciously convenient. Is there any way to prove what she's done? Zara asked desperately. Bennett tapped his fingers thoughtfully on his desk. Banks keep separate records of withdrawals, including signatures authorizing them. If Victoria has been removing funds, she would have had to forge your signature or convince the bank she had authority to access the accounts. Would the bank share those records with us? Flynn asked. Not willingly, Bennett admitted. But as the executor of Jonathan's estate, I can request an audit if I suspect impropriety. It would force them to produce the withdrawal slips and account statements. Hope surged in Zara's heart. How quickly could you arrange this? I'll send the request first thing tomorrow morning, Bennett promised. But Miss Thornton, you should be prepared. If Victoria has indeed been systematically defrauding you, she's unlikely to surrender without a fight. I'm not afraid of her, Zara said with more confidence than she felt. I just want the truth to come out. Bennett's expression softened. Your father would be proud of your determination. He spoke of you often, you know. It was clear you were the light of his life. Tears pricked at Zara's eyes. Thank you for saying so. As they left Bennett's office, the setting sun painted the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. Flynn offered Zara his arm as they walked back toward the mercantile. You did well in there, he told her. Bennett seems like a man of integrity. He is, Zara agreed. Father trusted him implicitly. She glanced up at Flynn's profile. Do you really think we can prove Victoria's deception? I do, he said firmly. The truth has a way of surfacing, especially when people like Bennett start asking the right questions. He paused. Have you reconsidered my offer about the store? Zara took a deep breath. "If you're still willing, I'd be grateful for your help, but only as a loan. Once the store is secure again, I'll repay every penny." Flynn smiled. "We can discuss terms later. For now, let's focus on stopping the foreclosure and clearing your name." They had reached the mercantile. Zara withdrew her key, suddenly reluctant for their evening to end. Flynn seemed to share her hesitation. "Would you care to join me for supper?" he asked. "The hotel dining room serves a decent meal." Zara hesitated, aware of how such an invitation might be perceived given the rumors already circulating. But the prospect of returning to her empty rooms above the store, alone with her worries, held little appeal. "I'd like that," she decided. "Let me just fetch my shawl." The hotel dining room was modestly crowded when they arrived. Heads turned as Flynn escorted Zara to a table near the window. She could hear the whispers start immediately. "Perhaps this wasn't wise," she murmured as they sat down. "Nonsense," Flynn replied. "You have every right to enjoy a meal in public without concern for gossip." Their server approached, a young woman named Lucy who had attended school with Zara years earlier. "Good evening, Miss Thornton, Mr. Ryder," she greeted them, her curious gaze darting between them. "Evening, Lucy," Flynn replied easily. "What's good tonight?" "Cook's made his venison stew," she answered. "And there's fresh bread." "Sounds perfect," Flynn said. "2 bowls of stew, please, and whatever vegetables are being served." Lucy nodded and hurried away. Zara could see her immediately bend to whisper to another server, both glancing back at their table. "I'm sorry about this," she said to Flynn. "Your reputation will suffer by association with me." Flynn's expression remained unconcerned. "My reputation can withstand a few whispers, Miss Thornton. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I've never much cared what others think of me." "That must be liberating," Zara observed. "It can be," he agreed, "though I will admit to caring what certain individuals think." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than strictly necessary. Zara felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the cozy temperature of the dining room. There was something in Flynn's gaze and admiration, perhaps even an attraction that she hadn't noticed before. Or perhaps she simply hadn't allowed herself to notice it. Lucy returned with their food, and conversation shifted to lighter topics. Flynn told stories of his cattle drives, painting vivid pictures of starlit nights on the open range and the camaraderie among the men who worked for him. Zara found herself laughing for the first time in months at his description of a particularly stubborn steer that had led them on a wild chase through a cactus-filled ravine. "You love it, don't you?" she observed. "The open country, the freedom of it," Flynn nodded. "There's nothing like it. Waking up with the sun, feeling like you're the first person to see the mountains in that particular light." He took a bite of stew. "What about you? Have you always wanted to run the mercantile?" "I never considered any other path," Zara admitted. "From the time I was small, I helped Father in the store. I loved watching him with customers, the way he remembered everyone's preferences and family news. The store wasn't just a business to him, it was a way to be part of the community." "He taught you well," Flynn said. "I've seen how you are with your customers, even the ones who are treating you poorly these days." Zara sighed. "It's difficult, knowing what they think of me." "They'll learn the truth soon enough," Flynn assured her. They were finishing their meal when the dining room door opened to admit Victoria and Edmund Holloway. The couple paused in the entranceway, Victoria's gaze immediately finding Zara and Flynn's table. Her eyes narrowed before she leaned to whisper something to Edmund. "Trouble," Flynn murmured, noticing them as well. Victoria guided Edmund toward their table, her silk dress rustling elegantly as she moved. At 35, she was still strikingly beautiful, with her auburn hair arranged fashionably and her figure accentuated by expertly tailored clothing. "Zara, darling," she greeted with false warmth. "How lovely to see you enjoying yourself, and Mr. Ryder, what a pleasant surprise." Zara forced a smile. "Victoria, Mr. Holloway." Edmund Holloway inclined his head slightly. He was a tall, distinguished man of 45 with silver threading through his dark hair and cold eyes that assessed everything in terms of value. "Miss Thornton, Ryder." Flynn stood politely, though his posture remained wary. "Mrs. Thornton, Holloway." "I must say, I'm surprised to see you dining out, Zara," Victoria continued, her voice carrying just enough to be overheard by nearby tables. "Given the financial circumstances, one would think you'd be economizing." "I invited Miss Thornton to dine as my guest," Flynn said before Zara could respond. Victoria's smile took on a calculating edge. "How gallant! Though I must warn you, Mr. Ryder, my stepdaughter, has developed quite expensive tastes lately. You might find yourself covering more than just dinner." Zara felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. The implication was clear to everyone within earshot. "Mrs. Thornton," Flynn said, his voice deceptively pleasant, "I've always found that those who accuse others of dishonesty often have the most to hide themselves." He turned to Edmund. "Wouldn't you agree, Holloway? In your business dealings, haven't you noticed that the first to cry theft are often covering their own tracks?" Edmund's expression hardened. "Careful, Ryder. You're speaking to my future wife." "Indeed I am," Flynn replied evenly. "And she's speaking about the daughter of one of the most respected men who ever lived in this town. Jonathan Thornton would be appalled to hear such insinuations about his child, particularly from a woman who benefited so generously from his kindness." Victoria's artificial smile vanished. "You overstep, Mr. Ryder. What occurs between me and my stepdaughter is a family matter. It became more than that when you began spreading false rumors throughout Portland," Flynn countered. "Miss Thornton's reputation is worth defending, and I intend to do so." Victoria's eyes glittered dangerously. "How chivalrous! One wonders what you hope to gain from such vigorous defense." "The satisfaction of seeing justice done," Flynn replied simply. Edmund placed a possessive hand on Victoria's elbow. "Come, my dear. Our table is ready, and this conversation is beneath you." With a final venomous glance at Zara, Victoria allowed herself to be led away. The dining room buzzed with whispers in their wake. "I apologize for speaking out of turn," Flynn said when they were gone. "I had no right to involve myself in your family matters." "No," Zara said softly. "Thank you for defending me. Again." She shook her head. "Victoria has always been skilled at making me feel small and powerless. You didn't let her succeed tonight." Flynn's expression softened. "You're neither small nor powerless, Miss Thornton. You're one of the strongest women I've ever met." The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, touched something deep within Zara. For months, she had been fighting to keep her father's store afloat while enduring Victoria's cruelty alone. Having someone see her struggle and value her for it rather than pity her was a gift she hadn't known she needed. They finished their meal in companionable silence before Flynn escorted her back to the Mercantile. At her door, he hesitated. "Will you be all right here alone?" Zara nodded. "I've been managing on my own for 6 months now. One more night won't make a difference." Flynn studied her face in the lamplight. "Tomorrow I'll speak with the bank about my investment in the store. With any luck, it will at least buy us time until Bennett's audit reveals the truth." "Flynn," Zara said impulsively, using his first name for the first time. "Why are you doing all this? The truth now not just about repaying my father's kindness." He seemed to consider his words carefully before answering. "Because from the moment I first saw you helping your father in this store, I thought you were remarkable. You were patient with difficult customers, clever with numbers, and you had a smile that could light up the darkest day. He looked away briefly, then back at her. I've watched you from a distance for years, Zara. I've seen your kindness, your intelligence, your determination. When I heard what Victoria was doing to you, I couldn't stand by and let it happen. Zara's heart raced at his candid admission. You've been watching me for years. A hint of color touched his tan cheeks. Not in a troubling way, I assure you, just noticing, admiring, from a respectful distance. The revelation that this man, this strong, honorable man, had seen something in her worth admiring all this time left Zara momentarily speechless. I should go, Flynn said, misinterpreting her silence. I've spoken too freely. No, Zara said quickly, placing her hand on his arm to stop him. I'm just surprised. I had no idea you noticed me. Flynn's gaze dropped to her hand on his arm, then returned to her face. How could I not? The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then Flynn gently stepped back, breaking the spell. Good night, Zara, he said softly. Lock your door. I'll return in the morning. Good night, she echoed, watching as he walked away, his tall figure silhouetted against the gas lamps of Portland's Main Street. That night, for the first time since her father's death, Zara fell asleep with hope warming her heart instead of dread chilling it. Whatever happened with the store, she was no longer facing Victoria's machinations alone. Flynn Rider believed in her, and that made all the difference in the world. Morning brought a clear sky and brisk autumn air. Zara opened the store at 8 as usual, determined to maintain normalcy despite the uncertainty of her situation. To her surprise, there were already customers waiting: Mrs. Jenkins from the bakery and elderly Mr. Thompson, both of whom had been noticeably absent in recent weeks. Good morning, she greeted them, trying to hide her astonishment at their presence. Morning, Miss Thornton, Mr. Thompson said, removing his hat. I need some tobacco and perhaps a new pipe if you've got him. Of course, Zara replied, leading him to the display case. We received a shipment of cherry wood pipes just last week. As she helped Mr. Thompson select his purchases, Mrs. Jenkins browsed the fabric bolts, occasionally glancing Zara's way with an appraising look. When Mr. Thompson departed, the baker approached the counter. My Henry saw you dining with Flynn Rider last evening, Mrs. Jenkins said without preamble. Zara kept her expression neutral. Yes, Mr. Rider was kind enough to invite me to supper. Henry also overheard what Mr. Rider said to your stepmother, Mrs. Jenkins continued, watching Zara closely, about defending your reputation. Mr. Rider feels strongly about justice, Zara replied carefully. Mrs. Jenkins nodded slowly. I've known Flynn Rider for 7 years, Miss Thornton. He's not a man who speaks without thinking, nor one who would stake his good name on someone he didn't believe in completely. She paused. It's made me wonder if perhaps I've been too quick to believe certain stories. Hope flickered in Zara's chest. Mrs. Jenkins, I assure you, the rumors about me are false. I've never taken a penny from this store that wasn't rightfully mine. The older woman studied her for a long moment. Your father was always fair with me, selling me sugar at cost when prices soared during that shortage 3 years back. He said it was because the town needed its bread more than he needed profit. She smoothed her apron. A man like that would have raised his daughter with the same values. Before Zara could respond, the bell above the door jingled again as Flynn entered. His presence seemed to fill the small store immediately. Good morning, Mrs. Jenkins, he greeted the baker. Those cinnamon rolls in your window smell divine today. Mrs. Jenkins smiled warmly. Fresh from the oven, Mr. Rider. You should stop by on your way out. I believe I will, Flynn replied with an easy charm that made Mrs. Jenkins practically beam at him. As the baker departed, Flynn turned to Zara. "You look well this morning." "I feel better than I have in months," she admitted, "and I think Mrs. Jenkins might be reconsidering her opinion of me, thanks to you." "Not thanks to me," Flynn corrected. "Thanks to your father's good reputation and your own character, people will remember who you truly are given time." "Did you speak with the bank?" Zara asked. Flynn nodded. "I did. Mr. Wilson was reluctant at first, but when I presented him with proof of my funds and explained that I wished to become a partner in Thornton's mercantile, he agreed to postpone the foreclosure pending our formal partnership agreement." Relief washed over Zara. "So the store is safe for now?" "For now," Flynn confirmed. "We have 2 weeks to finalize the partnership and submit the paperwork to the bank. By then, hopefully Bennett will have completed his audit and uncovered evidence of Victoria's tampering." Zara impulsively reached for Flynn's hand, squeezing it gratefully. "I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." Flynn's fingers curled around hers. "You don't need to repay anything. This partnership benefits us both. You keep your store and I gain a stake in a successful business." The tenderness in his eyes suggested other benefits he might be hoping for, but he didn't voice them. Instead, he gently released her hand. "I should let you attend to your customers," he said, nodding toward the door where several people had entered. "I have some business at the land office, but I'll return this afternoon. Perhaps we could begin discussing terms for our partnership." "I'd like that," Zara agreed. Throughout the morning, Zara noticed a subtle shift in how she was being treated. While some customers remained cool, others like Mrs. Jenkins and Mr. Thompson seemed to be reassessing their opinions. She wondered how much of it was due to Flynn's public defense of her the previous evening. Around noon, Mr. Bennett appeared, his expression somber. "Miss Thornton," he greeted her. "Might we speak privately in her office?" The solicitor got straight to the point. "I've initiated the audit as we discussed. In the process, I've discovered something troubling." He removed a document from his briefcase. "This is a copy of a power of attorney supposedly signed by you 3 months ago, granting Victoria authority to conduct financial transactions on your behalf." Zara stared at the document in shock. "I never signed this." "I suspected as much," Bennett said grimly. "The signature is quite convincing, but there are subtle differences from your actual handwriting." "She forged my signature," Zara breathed, anger and disbelief warring within her. "It appears so," Bennett agreed. "With this document, Victoria would have had legal access to all the store's accounts. The bank would have had no reason to question her withdrawals." "Can we prove the forgery?" Bennett nodded. "I've already consulted a handwriting expert in Salem. He'll examine the document next week. In the meantime, I've instructed the bank to freeze all accounts associated with the mercantile to prevent further withdrawals." "Victoria will be furious," Zara said. "Undoubtedly," Bennett agreed. "But if she's been systematically defrauding you, she should be more concerned about the legal consequences of her actions. Forgery is a serious crime, Miss Thornton." After Bennett left, Zara found herself trembling with a mixture of anger and vindication. Victoria had gone to extraordinary lengths to steal her inheritance, forging legal documents, spreading vicious rumors, manipulating the bank. The depth of her stepmother's betrayal was staggering. The bell above the door jangled again, and Zara composed herself before stepping out of her office. Her composure immediately fractured when she saw Victoria standing at the counter, her expression thunderous. "How dare you?" Victoria hissed, keeping her voice low enough that the few customers browsing couldn't hear. "You've frozen the accounts." "Mr. Bennett did, as executor of Father's estate," Zara replied, struggling to keep her own voice steady. "He's investigating discrepancies in the withdrawals." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You stupid girl. Do you have any idea what you've done? Edmund was prepared to give you a generous settlement after our marriage enough to start a new life elsewhere. Now you'll be fortunate if you leave Portland with the clothes on your back." "I don't want your blood money," Zara said, her courage building. "I want my father's store, the one you've been systematically stealing from while blaming me for the losses." "Prove it," Victoria challenged, a dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Even if Bennett finds irregularities, it will be your word against mine." Who do you think people will believe, the respected widow of Jonathan Thornton, or his naive daughter who's suddenly cavorting with Flynn Rider? "They'll believe the evidence," came Flynn's deep voice from the doorway. Victoria whirled to face him. "This doesn't concern you, Mr. Rider." "I disagree," Flynn said mildly, approaching them. "As Miss Thornton's business partner, anything affecting the mercantile concerns me directly." Victoria's eyes widened slightly before her composure returned. "Business partner? How convenient. And when did this arrangement materialize?" "This morning," Flynn replied. "The paperwork is being drawn up as we speak. Thornton's mercantile will remain exactly that, a Thornton family business with Miss Thornton as the primary owner." "For now," Victoria said icily, "but this changes nothing. Bennett's investigation is a desperate ploy that will ultimately fail." "Perhaps," Flynn allowed. "But even if it did, the foreclosure has been halted. The store remains in Zara's possession, with me as her partner. Your plan to deliver it to Holloway as a wedding gift has failed." Victoria's face contorted with fury. "You'll regret interfering, Mr. Rider. Both of you will." She turned on her heel and swept out of the store, nearly colliding with a customer entering. "Well," Flynn said once she was gone, "I believe we've officially declared war." "She as much as admitted she's been stealing," Zara said, her voice unsteady, "and she threatened us." Flynn's expression hardened. "Victoria is used to getting her way through intimidation. We won't give her the satisfaction of succeeding." He reached for Zara's hand. "Are you all right?" The simple gesture of comfort, combined with the genuine concern in his eyes, nearly undid her. "I'm angry," she admitted, "and a little frightened. Victoria won't stop until she gets what she wants." "Neither will we," Flynn assured her, his thumb tracing a soothing pattern on the back of her hand. "Bennett is building a strong case. Once he has proof of the forgery, Victoria's threats will be meaningless." Zara nodded, drawing strength from his confidence. "You're right. We just need to hold our ground until then." The following days fell into a new pattern. Flynn divided his time between his cattle operation and the mercantile, often helping Zara with inventory or heavy lifting in the afternoons. They worked together seamlessly, as if they'd been partners for years rather than days. In the evenings, they sometimes shared supper at the hotel or in Zara's small apartment above the store, where Flynn regaled her with stories of his adventures on cattle drives. Through it all, Zara found herself growing increasingly aware of Flynn as more than just her business partner and defender. She noticed the way the corner of his mouth quirked up when he was amused, the thoughtful furrow of his brow when he was considering a problem, the gentleness of his hands despite their strength. More than once, she caught him watching her with an expression that made her heart race and her cheeks warm. Portland's residents had begun to take notice as well. The whispers about Zara's supposed dishonesty were gradually being replaced by speculation about her relationship with Flynn. Victoria remained conspicuously absent from town, though Edmund Holloway was occasionally seen entering the bank or the land office with a grim expression. A week after their confrontation with Victoria, Bennett requested a meeting with Zara and Flynn at his office. "I have news," he told them once they were seated. "The handwriting expert has confirmed that the power of attorney document was indeed forged. Furthermore, The bank has provided records of withdrawals made using that document. Over the past 6 months, Victoria has removed nearly $4,000 from the mercantile's accounts. That's almost our entire cash reserve, Zara said, appalled. Bennett nodded gravely. Yes, and there's more. I've uncovered evidence that Victoria has been transferring those funds to a private account in San Francisco. One she established jointly with Edmund Holloway 3 months before your father's death. Flynn leaned forward. 3 months before. Are you certain of the timing? Quite certain, Bennett confirmed. The account was opened on November 8th of last year. Your father fell ill on February 7th and died on the 12th. That can't be coincidence, Zara said slowly, the implications dawning on her. Victoria and Edmund were planning this before father even became ill. It appears so, Bennett agreed. I've also discovered that Victoria has been making regular purchases of a particular medicine from the apothecary since, shortly after her marriage to your father. What kind of medicine? Flynn asked, his expression darkening. Bennett hesitated. Arsenic compound. Zara felt the blood drain from her face. Arsenic, but that's poison. It's also prescribed in small doses for certain conditions, Bennett said carefully. Nervous complaints, skin ailments, and the like. However, taken consistently over time in slightly larger doses. It causes symptoms similar to pneumonia, Flynn finished grimly, and eventually leads to death. A cold horror settled in Zara's stomach. Are you suggesting that Victoria poisoned my father? Bennett spread his hands. I'm merely presenting the facts as I've uncovered them. Your father was in excellent health until his sudden illness. The doctor diagnosed pneumonia based on the symptoms, but no tests were performed that would have detected arsenic. She murdered him, Zara whispered, gripping the arms of her chair to steady herself. She murdered my father for his money. Flynn moved to kneel beside her chair, one strong hand covering hers. Zara, we don't know that for certain. But we can find out, Bennett interjected. With the evidence I've gathered, I can petition the court for an exhumation order. If arsenic is present in Jonathan's remains, it would provide conclusive proof. Zara closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the horror of it all. The thought of disturbing her father's rest was painful, but the possibility that Victoria had deliberately ended his life had stolen his future, and Zara's time with him was unbearable. Do it, she said at last, opening her eyes to meet Bennett's concerned gaze. If Victoria poisoned him, I want her held accountable, Bennett nodded solemnly. I'll file the petition today. In the meantime, I've already informed the sheriff about the forgery and embezzlement. He's preparing to arrest Victoria on those charges alone. When? Flynn asked. Tomorrow morning, Bennett replied. I thought you should both be prepared. After leaving Bennett's office, Flynn insisted on walking Zara home. She moved mechanically beside him, her mind still reeling from the revelations. I knew she was cruel, she said as they reached the mercantile. I knew she was greedy, but I never imagined she would murder my father. Flynn guided her to a bench outside the store. Bennett was careful to say, we don't know for certain yet. But it makes terrible sense, Zara said, finally giving voice to her suspicions. Father was never ill a day in his life until suddenly he couldn't catch his breath, couldn't keep food down. The doctor said it was pneumonia, but it progressed so quickly. She shook her head. I should have questioned it. I should have realized something wasn't right. You had no reason to suspect foul play, Flynn said gently. No one did. Victoria presented herself as the grieving widow perfectly. Zara's hands trembled in her lap. All these months I've been living in the same town as my father's murderer. Taking her barbs, enduring her cruelty while she plotted to steal everything he built. Flynn covered her hands with his own. Listen to me, Zara. If Victoria poisoned your father, she will face justice. The law will see to that. But right now, you need to focus on what you can control, keeping the store running, rebuilding your reputation in town. She looked up into his concerned face. How can I think about the store when I've just learned my father was murdered? Because the store was his legacy to you, Flynn said simply. Living well, continuing what he built, that's how you honor him. He squeezed her hands gently. And you don't have to do it alone. I'm here. Those two words, so simple, yet so powerful, broke through Zara's shock. Tears welled in her eyes and spilled down her cheeks. Flynn wordlessly opened his arms, and she leaned into his embrace, finally allowing herself to release the grief and horror that had been building inside her. He held her as she cried, one hand stroking her hair soothingly, murmuring quiet words of comfort. In his arms, Zara felt safe for the first time since her father's death, anchored when everything else seemed to be spinning out of control. When her tears finally subsided, she became acutely aware of how close they were, her head against his chest, his arms encircling her protectively. She should have felt embarrassed by such intimacy in public, but instead, she found herself reluctant to move away from his warmth. "I'm sorry," she said nonetheless, slowly pulling back to look up at him. "I didn't mean to fall apart." Flynn's expression was tender as he carefully brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You have nothing to apologize for. Anyone would be devastated by such news." His touch lingered on her face, and for a breathless moment, Zara thought he might kiss her. Something in his eyes suggested he wanted to, a warmth that had nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with the growing connection between them. Instead, he slowly lowered his hand. "You should rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges when Victoria is arrested." Zara nodded, though she felt a pang of disappointment. "Will you be there when they take her into custody, if you want me to be?" Flynn replied. "I do," she admitted. "I don't think I can face her alone, knowing what she might have done." "Then I'll be at your side," he promised. "Try to get some sleep, Zara. I'll return in the morning." That night, sleep eluded Zara as her mind churned with the day's revelations. The thought that Victoria might have slowly poisoned her father, watching him suffer, pretending to care for him while systematically killing him, was almost too horrific to comprehend. Yet it explained so much. The suddenness of his illness, the rapid decline, the way Victoria had been so prepared to take control after his death. Dawn found Zara already dressed and moving mechanically through her morning routine. She opened the store at 8 as usual, though she doubted she'd have the focus for customers today. To her surprise, Flynn was already waiting outside, his expression concerned. "You didn't sleep," he observed as she unlocked the door. "No," she admitted. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Father in those last days, struggling to breathe, and Victoria beside him, pretending to tend to him while—" Flynn stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. "Don't torture yourself with those images. Focus on what's happening now. Victoria will face justice today." As if summoned by his words, Sheriff Dawson appeared at the end of the street, accompanied by 2 deputies. They moved purposefully toward the hotel where Victoria had been staying since Jonathan's death. "It's happening," Zara murmured, moving to the store window for a better view. Flynn stood beside her, a steady presence at her shoulder. Bennett must have informed them where to find her. They watched as the sheriff entered the hotel. Minutes ticked by in tense silence before the doors opened again. Sheriff Dawson emerged first, followed by Victoria, her wrists manacled before her. Even in custody, she maintained her regal bearing, chin lifted defiantly. The small procession had just reached the street when Edmund Holloway appeared, riding hard from the direction of his ranch. He dismounted in a flurry of dust, his face contorted with rage as he confronted the sheriff. What is the meaning of this? His voice carried clearly in the morning air. Release my fiancée immediately. Sheriff Dawson stood his ground. Mrs. Thornton is under arrest for forgery, embezzlement, and possible other charges pending investigation. Step aside, Holloway. Edmund's hand moved toward his gun, but the deputies were quicker, their own weapons drawn in an instant. Don't be a fool, one warned. For a tense moment, it seemed Edmund might risk everything to free Victoria. Then, with a visible effort, he controlled himself. This is a mistake, he insisted. Victoria is innocent of any wrongdoing. The evidence says otherwise, Dawson replied coolly. Now move aside or join her in a cell. Edmund stepped back, his cold gaze finding the mercantile where Zara and Flynn watched from the window. The hatred in his eyes sent a chill down Zara's spine. He blames us, she whispered. Let him, Flynn said firmly. He's as guilty as she is if he knew what she was doing. As the sheriff led Victoria away, she suddenly turned her head, her gaze locking with Zara's across the distance. There was no remorse in Victoria's eyes, only fury, and an unmistakable promise of retribution. The day passed in a blur of activity. News of Victoria's arrest spread through Portland like wildfire, bringing curious townspeople to the mercantile to see Zara's reaction firsthand. Some offered awkward apologies for believing the rumors. Others simply observed with undisguised interest. Flynn remained at the store throughout the day, a buffer between Zara and the more intrusive questions. By closing time, Zara was exhausted from maintaining her composure. As she locked the door behind the last customer, her shoulders sagged with fatigue. You should eat something, Flynn suggested. You've barely taken a moment for yourself all day. I'm not hungry, Zara replied, though she couldn't remember when she'd last eaten. Flynn gave her a knowing look. Regardless, you need to keep up your strength. I could bring something from the hotel kitchen. Before Zara could respond, a sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Through the glass, she could see Bennett standing outside, his expression urgent. Flynn opened the door immediately. Bennett. What's happened? The solicitor stepped inside, removing his hat. I'm afraid I have disturbing news. Edmund Holloway posted bail for Victoria an hour ago. Bail? Zara echoed in disbelief. How is that possible? Judge Parker set it at $2,000, a substantial amount, but well within Holloway's means, Bennett explained. I argued against it given the seriousness of the charges, but Parker has known Holloway for years. They're both members of that businessmen's club. So Victoria is free? Zara asked, a cold dread settling in her stomach. Bennett nodded grimly. For now. Her trial is set for next month. But that's not all. Shortly after her release, Victoria and Holloway were seen at the livery stable, purchasing horses and supplies. They're planning to run, Flynn concluded. It appears so, Bennett agreed. Sheriff Dawson has sent deputies to watch the roads out of town, but if they slip away tonight, they could be halfway to California before anyone realizes they're gone, Flynn finished. Zara sank into a nearby chair. And what about the investigation into my father's death? If Victoria flees? The exhumation order was granted this afternoon, Bennett assured her. The procedure will take place tomorrow, regardless of whether Victoria remains in Portland. If evidence of poisoning is found, it will only add to the charges against her and make extradition more certain if she does escape. Flynn's expression darkened. She won't get far, not with every lawman between here and the California border looking for her. I pray you're right, Bennett said. But I thought you should both be warned. Victoria was volatile when she was released. She made threats against Zara specifically. Flynn moved protectively closer to Zara. What kind of threats? Bennett hesitated. She said, and I quote, she'll pay for this before I'm done. I took her father. I can take everything else she loves too. Zara felt the blood drain from her face. She admitted it. She admitted killing my father. In her anger, yes, Bennett confirmed. Sheriff Dawson heard it as well, which is why he's posted a deputy outside the Mercantile tonight. Victoria won't get near you, Zara. After Bennett left, Flynn insisted on staying at the store as well. I'll sleep in the storeroom, he said when Zara protested. I won't rest easy knowing Victoria is out there harboring such rage toward you. Too exhausted to argue, Zara agreed. She found extra blankets for Flynn and showed him where the spare pillows were kept. Thank you, she said softly as they stood in the dimly lit storeroom. For everything. I don't know how I would have faced any of this without you. Flynn's eyes were gentle in the lamplight. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Zara. You would have found a way. Perhaps, she allowed, but I'm glad I didn't have to. His gaze held hers for a long moment, and once again, Zara felt that current of connection between them, something deeper than partnership or even friendship. Then Flynn cleared his throat. You should get some rest, he said. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. Zara nodded, though she was reluctant to leave his presence. Good night, Flynn. Good night, Zara, he replied softly. Lock your door. She did as he suggested, though she felt safer knowing Flynn was just downstairs. Still, sleep remained elusive. Victoria's threat echoed in her mind. I took her father. I can take everything else she loves too, along with the image of Edmund Holloway's hateful gaze. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and Zara drifted into a restless sleep plagued by dreams of her father's final days. She woke with a start several hours later, certain she'd heard something. The room was dark, but moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows on the walls. Then she heard it again, a faint creak from the staircase that led up from the store. Someone was coming up to her apartment. Heart pounding, Zara slipped from her bed and reached for the poker beside the small fireplace. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate. Flynn would have called out to identify himself, she reasoned. This was someone else. The doorknob turned slowly, then rattled as the intruder discovered it was locked. There was a pause, then a soft scratching sound, someone picking the lock. Zara gripped the poker tighter, positioning herself beside the door. The lock clicked, and the door began to open. Moonlight glinted off metal as a gun appeared first, followed by Edmund Holloway's shadowed face. Zara didn't hesitate. She swung the poker with all her strength, striking his arm. Holloway let out a startled yell of pain as the gun clattered to the floor. Zara darted past him, making for the stairs, but he recovered quickly, grabbing her arm with bruising force. You little witch, he snarled. Victoria said you'd be trouble. Flynn, Zara screamed, struggling against Holloway's grip. Flynn, help! Holloway slammed her against the wall, his face contorted with rage. Ryder can't help you now. Victoria's taking care of him. Terror gripped Zara's heart. What have you done to him? The same thing we're going to do to you, Holloway growled. Make it look like an accident. Such a tragedy store catches fire in the night. Owner and her gentleman friend perish in the flames. Zara fought with renewed desperation, kicking and clawing at Holloway's face. Her nails caught his cheek, drawing blood. He cursed and struck her across the face, dazing her momentarily. Through the ringing in her ears, Zara heard heavy footsteps pounding up the stairs. Holloway whirled, reaching for his fallen gun, but he was too slow. Flynn burst into the room, his own weapon drawn, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. Let her go, Holloway, he commanded, his voice deadly calm. Holloway froze, calculating his options with Zara still in his grasp. Victoria was supposed to take care of you, he said, eyes narrowing. She tried, Flynn replied, not lowering his gun. Made the mistake of thinking I'd drink that drugged coffee she offered. Where is she? Gone, Holloway said with a grim smile. Halfway to the California border by now. I stayed behind to tie up loose ends. Release Zara, Flynn repeated. Now, for a tense moment, Holloway didn't move. Then slowly he loosened his grip on Zara's arm. This isn't over, Ryder. For tonight it is, Flynn countered. Step away from her. As Holloway moved back, Zara stumbled toward Flynn, who steadied her with his free arm while keeping his gun trained on Holloway. Are you hurt? Flynn asked her, his eyes never leaving Holloway. Just shaken, Zara managed, though her cheek throbbed where Holloway had struck her. The sound of running footsteps came from below as the deputy stationed outside finally responded to the commotion. Moments later he appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn. Mr. Ryder. Miss Thornton, he called cautiously. In here, Deputy Miller, Flynn replied. Mr. Holloway was just about to explain why he broke into Miss Thornton's home in the middle of the night. Miller's eyes widened as he took in the scene. Mr. Holloway, what's the meaning of this? Ask him about the fire he was planning to set, Flynn suggested coldly, and about Victoria Thornton's current whereabouts. Miller moved forward, taking control of the situation as Holloway was disarmed and handcuffed. While the deputy escorted Holloway downstairs, Flynn turned his full attention to Zara. Let me see, he said gently, tilting her face to examine the red mark on her cheek. He hit you. I'm all right, Zara insisted, though she was trembling. But you're bleeding, Flynn. Your head, it's nothing, he dismissed. Victoria came to the storeroom with coffee. When I declined, she tried to hit me with a lantern. I dodged the worst of it, but she managed to slip away in the confusion. His eyes darkened with worry. I was searching for her when I heard you scream. Zara's legs suddenly felt unsteady as the reality of how close they'd come to disaster sank in. Flynn's arms encircled her immediately, supporting her weight as she leaned against him. It's over now, he murmured into her hair. You're safe. I've got you. In the aftermath, the sheriff arrived with additional deputies. Statements were taken, the store was searched for signs that Holloway might have already set his fire, and patrols were doubled to look for Victoria. By dawn, it was clear she had indeed fled town, likely heading for California, as Holloway had suggested. Sheriff Dawson insisted that Zara couldn't stay at the Mercantile, at least for the night. We don't know if Victoria has other accomplices, he explained. Until we're certain the threat is contained, you need more secure lodgings. She can stay at my ranch, Flynn offered. I have a housekeeper who lives on the property, and the ranch hands are loyal men. Victoria wouldn't get within a mile of the house. The suggestion made practical sense, but Zara hesitated, aware of how such an arrangement might appear to Portland's already gossip-prone residents. Sensing her concern, Flynn added, Mrs. Winters, my housekeeper, is a respectable widow who would serve as chaperone. Your reputation would be protected, Zara. After collecting some necessities from her apartment, Zara found herself riding beside Flynn as dawn broke over the hills surrounding Portland. His ranch was about 5 miles outside town, close enough for daily business, but far enough to offer the privacy he valued. As they crested a rise, the ranch came into view, a substantial 2-story house built of sturdy timber, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings stood nearby, and in the distance, cattle grazed in fenced pastures. It was larger and more established than Zara had expected. It's beautiful, she said honestly. Flynn smiled, looking pleased by her reaction. It was a shambles when I bought it 3 years ago. I've been fixing it up bit by bit between cattle drives. You never mentioned you owned such a fine property, Zara observed. Never had reason to, he replied simply. Besides, it's not the kind of thing a man brags about. Actions speak louder than words. As they approached the house, an older woman emerged onto the porch. Mrs. Winters, Zara presumed. She was a sturdy, no-nonsense-looking woman with graying hair and a kind face. "Mr. Ryder," she called out, "Sheriff Dawson sent word you were bringing a guest. I've prepared the blue room." Flynn helped Zara dismount before introducing her to the housekeeper. Mrs. Winters clucked sympathetically when she saw the bruise forming on Zara's cheek. "You poor dear," she said, leading Zara inside. "Let's get you settled with some tea and breakfast. You've had a terrible shock." The interior of the house was simply but comfortably furnished, with solid pieces that suggested Flynn valued quality over ornamentation. Mrs. Winters showed Zara to a pleasant bedroom decorated in shades of blue, with windows overlooking the eastern pastures. "Mr. Ryder had this room done up special," the housekeeper explained as she placed Zara's bag on a chair. "Said his mother always loved blue, and he wanted at least one room in the house to remind him of her." The personal touch moved Zara. Flynn spoke little of his family, and this glimpse into his sentiments touched her heart. After washing up and changing into fresh clothes, Zara joined Flynn and Mrs. Winters in the dining room. Despite her earlier protest that she wasn't hungry, Zara found her appetite returning as the housekeeper served a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits. "I need to ride into town for the—" Flynn paused, his expression softening. "For your father's exhumation." "Would you prefer to stay here and rest?" Zara shook her head firmly. "No, I need to be there. He was my father." Flynn nodded, understanding in his eyes. "We'll leave in an hour then. Mrs. Winters will pack us some food for midday." The exhumation was a solemn, difficult affair. Zara stood beside Flynn at a respectful distance, as workers carefully opened Jonathan Thornton's grave. Bennett was present, along with the sheriff, a doctor from Salem who specialized in toxicology, and several witnesses to ensure proper procedure was followed. When the casket was finally raised and opened, Zara turned away, unable to bear the sight of her father's remains. Flynn's arm came around her shoulders, offering silent support as she struggled to control her emotions. "This is the right thing," he reminded her gently. "If Victoria poisoned him, this will prove it beyond doubt." Zara nodded against his shoulder, drawing strength from his steady presence. The doctor worked efficiently, taking samples for testing while maintaining as much dignity as possible for the deceased. When the grim task was complete, Jonathan's casket was respectfully closed and returned to its resting place. "How long until we know?" Zara asked Bennett as the grave was filled. "The doctor will conduct his tests immediately," the solicitor replied. "We should have preliminary results by tomorrow, with more detailed findings within the week." As they prepared to leave the cemetery, Sheriff Dawson approached with news. "We've had word from the authorities in Sacramento," he informed them. Victoria Thornton was spotted boarding a steamship bound for San Francisco. "They've sent telegrams ahead, but—" "She might slip away in the city," Flynn finished grimly. "It's possible," Dawson acknowledged. "San Francisco is a big place with many ways to disappear. But every law enforcement office between here and there has her description. And with Holloway in custody and willing to talk to save his own skin, we may yet find her." That night, back at Flynn's ranch, Zara found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. The day's events kept replaying in her mind: Holloway's attack, the exhumation, the news that Victoria might escape justice after all. After tossing and turning for hours, she finally rose and wrapped a shawl around her nightdress. Perhaps some warm milk would help settle her thoughts. The house was quiet as she made her way downstairs in the moonlight. As she approached the kitchen, however, she saw a soft glow emanating from the doorway. Flynn sat at the kitchen table, a lamp burning low beside him as he studied what appeared to be architectural drawings. He looked up as she entered, surprise giving way to concern. "Zara, is everything all right?" "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Too many thoughts spinning through my mind." Flynn stood immediately. "Let me make you some tea. Mrs. Winters swears by her chamomile blend for restless nights." As he moved about the kitchen with easy familiarity, Zara settled at the table, curious about the drawings he'd been examining. "What are these?" she asked, gesturing to the papers. Flynn glanced over his shoulder as he heated water. "Plans for expanding the house. I've been thinking it needs another wing, maybe a larger kitchen, a proper library." "It's a lovely home already," Zara observed, "but these additions would make it even more so." "It's still missing something essential," Flynn said quietly, returning to the table with 2 cups of steaming tea. "What's that?" His eyes met hers over the rim of his cup. "A family to fill it." The simple statement hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Zara's heart quickened as she realized Flynn was watching her reaction carefully. "I thought you preferred your solitude," she said, remembering his reputation as a man who valued his independence. "I used to think so," he acknowledged. "But a man can change his mind when given the right reasons." Zara looked down at her tea, suddenly shy under the intensity of his gaze. "And have you found those reasons?" Instead of answering directly, Flynn reached across the table to cover her hand with his own. "Zara, I need to tell you something. I've wanted to for days, but with everything happening, it never seemed the right time." She looked up, meeting his eyes expectantly. "When I first offered to help you with the mercantile, I told you it was partly to repay your father's kindness. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth." He took a deep breath. "The real reason I couldn't stand by while Victoria destroyed your life is because I've cared for you for years from a distance, yes, but deeply nonetheless." Zara felt her breath catch. "Flynn, please let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not a man who speaks of his feelings easily, but these past weeks, working beside you, seeing your strength and your kindness even in the face of such betrayal, it's only confirmed what I already knew. You're an extraordinary woman, Zara Thornton." He paused, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "I'm not asking anything of you now. You've been through too much, and you need time to heal. But when this is all over, when Victoria is brought to justice, and your father's name and yours are cleared, I hope you might consider allowing me to court you properly." The tender sincerity in his eyes made Zara's heart swell. In the midst of all the darkness Victoria had brought into her life, Flynn Rider had been a steady light, guiding her through the storm. "I don't need time," she said softly. "These past weeks have shown me exactly who you are, Flynn. Your kindness, your integrity, your strength, they've been my anchor when everything else was falling apart." Hope kindled in his eyes. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that I would be honored to be courted by you," Zara affirmed, turning her hand beneath his to interlace their fingers. "Though I think we've already moved well beyond the formal introduction stage." A smile spread across Flynn's face, the most unreserved she'd ever seen from him. "We have at that." For a moment, they simply gazed at each other, hands joined across the table, the soft lamplight creating an intimate cocoon around them. Then Flynn stood, never releasing her hand, and moved around the table to stand beside her chair. "May I?" he asked, his free hand gently tilting her chin upward. Zara nodded, her heart racing as Flynn leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was both tender and reverent. His hand cradled her face as if she were made of porcelain, careful of the bruise on her cheek. When they finally parted, Zara felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her, as if pieces of her heart that had been shattered by grief and betrayal were finally beginning to mend. Flynn touched his forehead to hers, his eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. "I've wanted to do that since the day you stood up to Victoria in the store," he confessed. Zara smiled, reaching up to touch his cheek. "I wish you had." He chuckled softly, pressing a kiss to her palm before straightening. "It's late. We should both try to get some rest. Tomorrow may bring news about your father's tests." Though reluctant to end their time together, Zara knew he was right. The coming days would require all their strength and focus. Flynn escorted her back to her room, pausing at the door. "Good night, Zara," he said softly, bending to place one more gentle kiss on her lips. "Good night, Flynn," she replied, her heart lighter than it had been in months despite the challenges that still lay ahead. The following morning brought news in the form of a telegram from Dr. Lewis, the toxicologist. Bennett arrived at the ranch shortly after breakfast to deliver it personally. "He's found preliminary evidence of arsenic poisoning," the solicitor announced gravely. "The levels are consistent with long-term administration over several months. Dr. Lewis is confident the final analysis will confirm his findings." Though Zara had suspected the truth, having it confirmed still felt like a physical blow. "So she did murder him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Bennett replied solemnly. "And with this evidence, the charges against Victoria have been upgraded to include murder. The reward for information leading to her capture has been increased accordingly." Flynn's hand found Zara's, offering silent support. "What about Holloway? Has he provided any useful information about her possible whereabouts?" "He's talking freely now that he knows he's facing charges as an accessory to murder," Bennett confirmed. "He claims Victoria planned to establish herself in San Francisco under an assumed name before traveling to Europe. Apparently, they had discussed meeting in Paris once the investigation died down." "She really thought she would get away with it," Zara marveled, still struggling to comprehend the depth of her stepmother's evil. "That she could murder my father, steal his business, destroy my reputation, and simply start a new life elsewhere. People like Victoria believe themselves untouchable," Bennett said, "but justice has a way of finding them eventually." 3 days later, that justice arrived in the form of a telegram from the San Francisco police. Victoria had been apprehended attempting to book passage on a ship bound for Europe. She was being held in custody pending extradition to Oregon to stand trial for forgery, embezzlement, and the murder of Jonathan Thornton. As the news spread through Portland, the tide of public opinion shifted dramatically. Those who had been quickest to believe Victoria's lies about Zara now expressed outrage at having been deceived. Customers returned to the mercantile in droves, many offering awkward apologies or expressing their shock at Victoria's true nature. Zara received their contrition with grace, though privately she couldn't help but feel wounded by how readily the town had turned against her. Only Flynn seemed to truly understand her conflicted feelings. "It's natural to feel hurt," he told her as they walked along the river one evening, a week after Victoria's capture. "These people have known you all your life, yet they believed the worst of you on Victoria's word alone." "It's not just that," Zara admitted. "It's knowing that while Father was dying while Victoria was poisoning him I never suspected. I was in that house every day. I should have seen something, done something." Flynn stopped, turning to face her. "Zara, you can't blame yourself for Victoria's actions. She was calculating and cruel in ways most decent people can't even imagine. Your father wouldn't want you to carry this guilt." Tears welled in Zara's eyes. "I miss him so much. And now, knowing how he really died, that his time with me was stolen." Flynn gathered her into his arms, holding her close as she grieved anew for her father. "I know," he murmured. I know." When her tears subsided, Zara remained in the circle of Flynn's embrace, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing in me when no one else did, for fighting for my father's legacy." Flynn's hand gently stroked her hair. "I'll always fight for you, Zara. Always." Looking up at him, Zara saw the truth of his words reflected in his eyes. In the midst of her darkest days, Flynn Rider had become her champion, her partner, and now, something more precious still. Standing on tiptoe, she pressed her lips to his in a kiss that conveyed all the emotions words couldn't express: her gratitude, her admiration, and the love that had grown steadily between them through adversity. When they parted, Flynn smiled down at her with tenderness. "Come back to the ranch with me," he said softly. "Not just tonight, but permanently. Marry me, Zara." Though the proposal was sudden, it didn't feel rushed to Zara. In Flynn, she had found a man of honor and integrity, someone who had seen her at her most vulnerable and still looked at her with admiration and respect. Someone who had defended her name when it would have been easier to believe the lies. "Yes," she answered simply. "I will marry you, Flynn Rider." His smile was radiant as he lifted her off her feet in joy, spinning her around before setting her gently back on the ground. "I promise to make you happy," he vowed, "to honor your father's memory and help you continue his legacy." "Our legacy now," Zara corrected softly. "Both the store and the ranch." Flynn nodded, his expression serious. "Our life together begins today, Zara. Whatever comes, we'll face it side by side." In the weeks that followed, Portland buzzed with two parallel stories: Victoria and Edmund's upcoming trials and Zara and Flynn's engagement. The mercantile thrived under their joint management, with Flynn's cattle business providing additional capital for expansion. They planned a spring wedding, allowing time for the legal proceedings to conclude and for the town's gossip to settle. Victoria's trial was brief, but comprehensive. The evidence of her crimes was overwhelming, from the forged power of attorney to the bank records showing her systematic theft to the damning toxicology report confirming Jonathan Thornton's poisoning. She maintained her innocence to the end, but the jury was unconvinced. She was sentenced to hang for the murder of Jonathan Thornton. Edmund Holloway, facing charges as an accessory, turned state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed the full extent of their plot: how Victoria had begun poisoning Jonathan within months of their marriage, gradually increasing the dose when she discovered he had left the bulk of his estate to Zara rather than to her. On a bright April morning in 1877, Zara Thornton became Zara Rider in a simple ceremony attended by most of Portland's residents. The same community that had once shunned her based on Victoria's lies now celebrated her happiness, perhaps seeking to make amends for their earlier cruelty. Bennett gave the bride away, stepping in for the father who should have been there. Mrs. Jenkins provided a magnificent wedding cake, while Mr. Thompson presented the couple with a handcrafted rocking chair for their porch. As Flynn slipped a simple gold band onto Zara's finger, his eyes held promises that went beyond the vows. They exchanged promises of partnership, protection, and a love that had been forged in the crucible of adversity. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Flynn cupped Zara's face tenderly, his thumb caressing her cheek as he bent to seal their union with a kiss that spoke of both passion and reverence. The gathered crowd erupted in cheers, but for Zara, there was only Flynn, her defender, her partner, her love. At the reception held in the mercantile, Bennett approached the newlyweds with a document in hand. "A wedding gift," he explained, presenting it to Zara. "I had the name of the store legally changed. It's now officially Thornton and Ryder Mercantile, a partnership in name as well as deed. Tears of gratitude welled in Zara's eyes as she accepted the paper. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Father would have approved, I think." "Without question," the solicitor agreed. "Jonathan valued integrity above all else. He would have seen that same quality in your husband from the start." As the celebration continued around them, Flynn led Zara onto the small dance floor that had been created by pushing aside the store's displays. Drawing her into his arms, he moved with a surprising grace for a man more at home on horseback than in a ballroom. "Happy?" he asked softly, his eyes searching hers. "More than I ever thought possible," Zara replied honestly. "A year ago I couldn't have imagined this day. Victoria had taken so much: my father, my security, my good name. I felt so alone." "You're not alone anymore," Flynn promised, his arms tightening around her. "And you never will be again." Later that evening, as they rode toward the ranch, their home now, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Victoria's cruelty had been meant to destroy her, yet it had ultimately led her to Flynn, to a love deeper and more enduring than she could have imagined. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Ryder?" Flynn asked, smiling at the use of her new name. "About how sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures," Zara replied. "If Victoria hadn't tried to take everything from me, you might never have come to my defense. We might never have found each other." Flynn considered this. "I think we would have eventually. Some things are meant to be, Zara, even if the path getting there is harder than it should be." As the ranch came into view, bathed in the golden light of sunset, Zara knew he was right. Their story had begun in betrayal and heartache, but it had transformed into something beautiful, a testament to truth, justice, and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. 5 years later, the Ryder household was a lively one. Flynn and Zara had been blessed with twin boys, Jonathan and William, now 3 years old, and a 6-month-old daughter named Margaret. The ranch had prospered, as had the mercantile in town, which Zara still managed 3 days a week with the help of a capable assistant. Victoria's execution had finally taken place after multiple appeals, bringing formal closure to Jonathan Thornton's murder. Portland had largely moved past the scandal, though the story was still occasionally whispered about when newcomers inquired about the successful Thornton and Ryder mercantile. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Flynn surprised Zara with a special gift, a locket containing a portrait of her father that he'd commissioned from a photograph she had kept. "So he's always with you," Flynn explained as he fastened it around her neck. "The way he's always watching over all of us." Zara touched the locket reverently. "He would have loved you," she said, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes, "almost as much as I do." Flynn gathered her in his arms, his expression tender. "We built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy, didn't we?" "We did," Zara agreed, gazing out the window where their children played under Mrs. Winter's watchful eye. "Something that will last for generations." As Flynn's lips met hers in a kiss that held all the passion and tenderness of their first days together, Zara knew that her father's legacy lived on, not just in the mercantile that bore his name, but in the family she and Flynn had created. A family founded on truth, honor, and a love strong enough to withstand even the darkest lies. In the end, Victoria's cruelty had failed to destroy what Jonathan Thornton had built. Instead, it had ultimately led to its growth and expansion in ways he would have celebrated. And in Flynn, Ryder the cowboy who had known the truth and defended her name when no one else would, Zara had found not only a husband and partner, but a guardian for her father's memory and a builder of their shared future. Together, they had transformed lies into truth, betrayal into trust, and loss into love, creating a legacy that would endure long after Victoria's deceptions were forgotten.